Okay, so this is a project from Dare UK, which is a sibling, I guess, in many ways of Health Data Research UK. So the best way we describe it is it's very much like HDR UK, but more than health. So this is looking at how do you do analysis when it's healthcare data, but also, for example, data from the Office of National Statistics, and then also retail data or geography data. And so Dare UK are trying to understand how can you support and enable research at scale across the board. And they've done some really interesting pilot work at an event, I think it was last year. And they're looking at the impact that could be achieved if you remove some of these technical barriers for getting access to data. And it's quite startling how much money they reckon this could be worth to the UK economy. It's over £300 billion, they reckon, is currently withheld because it's just not possible and there's barriers in the way of doing the research. So they asked researchers, imagine what you could do if data linkage was not the problem. And then they worked out how much that would be worth. So it's really quite interesting there. They're, particularly with the government at the moment on their growth agenda, it's been very much framed in that way. So I think it's quite interesting how they've done that. And in particular, the work that we're doing, I'm a software developer by training. So I think everything is possible in the sense of I can just write some software and it will change the world type attitude. But obviously technology is changing rapidly. And also in both in academia and in industry, lots is changing in terms of what is possible. You only have to look at some of the latest ChatGPT and then equivalents coming out of China to see how fast this is all moving. But what's really interesting and is really important for us to understand is just because something is possible doesn't mean it's an acceptable thing to be doing with people's data. And so it's really important, obviously, that we get people's opinions. And often people's opinions does help drive policy and governance at a national level and with data controllers. And so we have to recognize there, not everything that is possible is acceptable. But also, there's a third component to this, is actually understanding what researchers need in order to undertake that research. So that comes under the useful branch. And unfortunately, not everything that's possible is useful, but also not everything that's acceptable is useful. So there might be some constraints you want to put on the particular types of data that can be linked or used or moved or not moved, but that puts potential constraints in for researchers, and they might not see that as a useful thing to be done, even if it's an acceptable thing to be done. And so there are these three drivers that we can see coming through. And I guess what we've seen happen over the last few years, really there's been a big shift in what's deemed as acceptable. So if you go back 5 years, it was much more acceptable to send data to the researcher. So a researcher applies, they get permission, and they're actually sent a copy of that data. What's changing is that shouldn't happen. Researchers should go and visit where the data is. They should log into that environment, analyze the data in that secure environment, and not actually be able to take that data away with them or have it on their particular drive, on their particular system. So we've seen a big shift, and that obviously the NHS England secure data environment is evidence of that shift away from data sharing to data access. So that's a big change in the sector. And actually, if we were to ask researchers what is the most useful thing to have, it is by far much, much better to have all the data in a single location with the compute that you need to analyze your data, and to have that as a simple experience for that researcher. But that's not the environment that we live in. And it is perfectly technically possible for all the data from healthcare in the UK to be provided in a single environment, but it's just not how it's been divided out. So we do have data across the 4 nations. We also have data that's stored in these environments domain-based. So there'll be a TRE, SDE for health, but there'll be one for smart data, which is a new program coming out, for example. But also we have data infrastructure, but we also have compute infrastructure. So high performance computing where you do AI, what Kevin mentioned right at the start in terms of that East Midlands program of reusing coal plants to have a big supercomputer center type thing there. Those things aren't always connected up. So where the data resides might not be the same place as where the compute resides, and it's definitely not where the researcher resides. So we naturally have a federated ecosystem. So completely acknowledging for researchers, it is probably much more useful to have the data in one place, but that's not the reality of where we are. The data scattered, people are scattered, and the compute is scattered. So if we were trying to do this with non-sensitive data, so data that's maybe already in the public domain, there might be some hardware, we might have some data, and we might want to run some software on that. And because this is open data, there's very little restrictions in what we can do. So as a researcher, you can say, actually, go and get this software from the internet, download it, and I'm going to run it against this data set. Completely uncontrolled environment, and that's perfectly fine because the data isn't sensitive in any way. And so then if you want to do analysis across multiple environments of that similar of capability, there's no issue because they all run on that type of basis. I can send my analysis there. There's no technical restrictions. There's no governance restrictions because it's non-sensitive data. But within a TRE or within an SDE, the key concept that is in operation is the airlock. So as a researcher, I can't bring anything in or take anything out with somebody checking it and ensuring that is okay to be brought in and that's okay to be brought out. Most of these environments, if not all, don't have access to the internet. So if I'm a researcher inside that environment analyzing the data, I can't access software packages that might be on the internet. And what that means is it's very, very hard to do an analysis between multiple of those environments because of the controlled nature. So we've got our three personas. We've got Razia, Trish, and Harriet. Razia is the researcher. So she can currently do federated analysis. We've seen it come out of COVID where a researcher will log into each environment, do their analysis in that environment, request the data to come out as in the summary results, and then do some sort of meta-analysis where you compare the results from those different environments. So it is possible, but it does put all the effort on Razia as a researcher to manage how to get into those different environments, the various different applications, and also the ability to run different code within it. So there's a good paper that came out from the HDR teams, for example, just around the different tools that are available in different environments. They don't all offer the same software. So you might write the analysis for one, but you have to do it all over again because another one doesn't offer that. Trish, the TRE, her main role is to protect the data. It's to make sure nothing leaves that environment that should not leave the environment. But at the same time, she's been approached by researchers wanting to install different tools to make it possible to be able to analyze data across multiple environments. And that's a challenge. How do you square off the desire to lock down and keep that data really secure with being part of a wider network and infrastructure? And then really interesting for Harriet, HPCs, high performance computers, like those supercomputers that you might hear about, are secure to an extent, but don't offer the same security as a TRE would. But to do some of this high-end analysis, researchers now need access to the high-performance compute. So Harriet is now being asked to act more like a TRE in relation to the governance models and the security to place around it. So summary, we've got a system that's not ideal when you want to do analysis across multiple environments. And what was really interesting, a report came out earlier in the year from Associated British Pharmaceutical Industry, and they were talking about some of these challenges, in particular around the SDE network, which is set up subnational, so they've got multiple 10, 11 SDEs around the country. So they were calling out the need to do things now, particularly in relation to federation. So they're wanting to make sure common data standards were put in place, and the enabling architecture was put in place to make it possible to do federation. Really interestingly, it was also their call to have direct access to anonymized data. They don't like this model of federation where it's eyes off, meaning I don't see the data as a researcher. I send my analysis in, it runs against the data and results come back, but I never see row level data. They were very clear that that's not very useful, but it is what's acceptable currently. So that's another example of where these two things collide. So TREvolution is being coordinated out of University of Nottingham. So I'm the overall director, but we then got the co-leads in also in Dundee, Manchester, Swansea, and West of England. We've also got NHS organisations involved and other universities, as well as collaborators internationally. So University of Basel and University of Cape Town working with us, as well as Queensland as well. And one of the things that we're trying to unpick here are, by introducing and understanding standards, can that help acceptability? So one of the challenges at the moment is there historically hasn't been a definition of what a TRE is, or what makes a TRE or doesn't make a TRE. How do you know that TRE is good? And that really matters when you want to create a network of TREs. If TRE A wants to be connected to TRE B, obviously it wants to make sure that TRE B is not going to do something that will compromise the security of TRE A. So how do we bring in the necessary security mechanisms and standards to enable that network to really come through and be something that is acceptable? So just giving you a very quick summary, we started in March, so it's very early still in the program. There's something called SATRA. This is work that came out of Dare UK previously. This is a self-assessment tool as a TRE, so you can go that you can view the standards that they say should be in place for a TRE, and you can self-assess against that standard. So it's a very early way of understanding as a TRE, am I doing what I should be doing? And that has fed through to some other programs, for example, the Secure Data Environment Program, but also some of the European programs looking at these standards as well. SACRO is a semi-automated mechanism for assessing the risk when you want to take something out of a TRE. So as a researcher, if you run your analysis via SACRO, it will tell you where something might be disclosive. So it doesn't give a firm yes or no, or this is okay to take out, or this isn't okay to take out, but it'll give the researcher some guidance about, is this the right thing to be doing, or be careful, you might be trying to, if you come to release this might actually have some disclosive within it. And then the TREs themselves can use those reports to also help semi-automate that disclosure control check. 5 saves, I think most people will know what they are, around the governance framework for assessing if a project should go ahead. And it's the main cornerstone kind of standard for TREs in the UK. Then we're starting to layer some things on top. So University of Swansea are looking at something called Director. Now, what's really key, I think some of the time we talk about federation and the ability to do analysis across multiple TREs, but it's not always the same thing. And there's never a single way of doing federation. What might be acceptable for one project might not be acceptable for a different project. So Director is a way of having some command and control within the system, where the TRE that has said we're going to sponsor and take this project forward can configure the network. So it can say, for this project, it's going to involve these TREs, and they're going to be allowed to run this type of analysis in a project that's operating between the multiple TREs. So it's looking at how do you bring that command and control in to ensure that only the TREs that are connected for that project are connected. Another project that was previously in Dare was something called TRE Effects, pronounced Terrifics. This was understanding how we can use standards to move analytics around. So plenty of federated analytics tools out there, plenty of federated platforms, plenty of federated learning, so federated AI, hundreds. Each SDE and TRE is not going to install hundreds of platforms within their system. So again, via standards, by adopting some of these international standards, can we have a secure, standardized way of bringing those analysis into the environment and deploying them across the network? And then we have some really cool stuff from University of Manchester called RO Crate. This is just a big box that you stick in everything that happened. So it can tell you who initiated this request, what was the project, what did they do, what data did it run on. So none of this is information about, there was no actual personal level data in there, but it's capturing all the provenance. So if you want to understand what did this project do, where did it run, what data sets did it run on, it captures all of that up in a single entity known as an RO crate. And then what we're wanting to make sure is we are not trying to build or create a federated tool or a federated analytics or a federated learning platform. So we're working with industry and academia who have those platforms to understand, can they deploy their tools and integrate their tools across this standards-based network. So at the bottom, standards help to make it acceptable. The technology that we're developing helps to make it possible. And by working with the partners who have existing platforms, we're trying to make sure it is useful. And I think that is it. So this is the last slide. This is the desired state. So we've had what was before with Razia. But now, if we can enable Razia to be able to select the analytics she wants to run, select the data that's required across those TREs, and also choose the level of compute she needs for her project, and press a button, and it runs. Obviously, there's a huge amount of governance that would have to occur, but this really is not a software project. This is a digital transformation program, but we've got to make sure it's sympathetic to the current governance. We're not trying to rip up the current governance. We're not trying to change what's acceptable, but we're trying to understand where is the boundary of what is acceptable so that we can change this for Razia so that she can do the analysis at a scale and a pace that wasn't possible before, and unlocking those benefits to the UK economy. That's it. Thank you.